put together a deal to merge our company with Republic Industries, and I was put in charge of the new vehicle division. I was employee number 2, and we later, over the course of 30 months, with an incredible team, went from 0 in revenue to 20 billion. We're the fastest growing company in America. And that was all of Republic, not just the automotive piece. Well, I guess it must be a problem I have looking for disruption in life. Certainly AutoNation in the early days with our rapid acquisition. I can remember being on the cover of an industry magazine with a big X through my face, and it's kind of like, Mike, what have you done? I like change, and I don't want to be on the trailing end of change. I'd like to be on the leading end of change. It's so easy in business to say, well, I did this and I did that. You know, my dad and I built this. The reality of it is there was thousands and thousands of people that dedicated countless hours and a lot of sweat and some tears to helping us build these businesses. And today, I try and stay in touch with as many of them as I can and keep letting them know how grateful I am for their help in us building a great business. And hopefully we help their families economically and in providing challenges and opportunities for them. So as I look back on my career, it's always been about the people that helped us grow these businesses and knowing that this is the ultimate team sport. Hi, I'm Mike Maroone, and this is Cars and Culture with Jason Stein.
An entrepreneur, a business leader, a philanthropist, a former hockey owner, and mostly my friend. What a pleasure to have you on SiriusXM. Welcome into Business Channel 132.
Jason, thanks for having me. I'm such a big fan of the show, and I've enjoyed so many episodes. It's quite an honor to be included today.
You've been there from the start, and I want to talk a little bit about the fact that when you and I go back to our own history, it starts with cars, but it really does start with sports. And if there's something that can meld cars and culture together, of course we'll talk cars, but the cultural piece is that you got to be a hockey guy this day and age, right? And I know you are.
Well, with me coming from Buffalo and you coming from the Detroit area, those hockey roots are deep. And our love of the sport, not just hockey, but all sports, is just one of the many pieces of our friendship.
Let's talk about the hockey, because most might not know that you once had a stake in a team that's working its way through the Stanley Cup playoffs. Tell me a little bit about the Florida Panthers and the business of hockey, Mike.
Well, Jason, I think that many young people, men and women, aspire to be professional sports owner. They see the glamour in it. They see the glory in it. They see their team winning championships. Well, it doesn't always work out that way. And I was a minority partner in the Florida Panthers from 2001 to 2013, and I enjoyed it immensely. It certainly wasn't my best business deal, but it was something that we could share with family. My dad was also a partner. My daughter was a big fan, and it was just a great chapter, but it is a very, very tough business. And it's fun to watch it now as a non-owner. You learn so much in professional sports. One of the things I learned is that I am not a great minority partner.
What did you learn of being a hockey owner?
Well, you learn the frustration. It's what you see on the ice is only one piece, but it's a big investment. It's a big cash drain. And most of the money made in sports is made on the sale of the franchise, certainly not from the operations. So when you have a group of people in it and there are a lot of capital calls, you quickly sort out who's committed to it and who's not. And it was really wonderful. The best part about it was the people we met. The players themselves were just awesome people, people from small towns around the world. And hockey has really become a global sport. And certainly in Florida, we're waking up to it, both with the Tampa team and the Florida team down here in South Florida. We have excellent hockey, and it's really been a fun experience.
But out of all the businesses that you've been in, I mean, it's risk reward, it's ups, it's downs. The business of sports is hard, right, Mike?
It's really hard. It's hard when you get beat badly. It's hard when you have to make payroll. It's hard when you're trying to attract fans to a team that hasn't had a history of winning. And most importantly, every owner and every manager and every part of sports, everybody wants to win. And generally, your investors are people who have won throughout their careers. And all of a sudden, they're finding that life isn't always fair.
Hockey in Florida. It's, I mean, you mentioned it a moment ago. I mean, Tampa's doing extremely well, as won Stanley Cups. Florida is on its way. Was that original model to attract snowbirds and then sort of everybody else? Or has the transition now gone maybe a little bit full circle, just given that so many folks from other parts of the country have moved into the state?
I think it's the latter. I think that there's so many people coming from hockey towns, like the towns we're from or the cities we're from, and they bring a passion for the game. Certainly, youth hockey has become a big part of South Florida. So I think we're growing our next set of hockey fans. But the original core group came from New York and Pittsburgh and Montreal and Toronto and Buffalo and Detroit and Chicago, and brought their passions with them. And in the early days, we would see that with the jerseys, or as they call them, sweaters in hockey, being the opposing team. Now that the Panthers have had a lot of success, we now see a sea of red in our arena, and that makes us very happy.
Yeah, it's an incredible atmosphere. I had the chance to join you recently. To me, it was like being dropped into any Original Six arena, which is a refreshing change. Do you have any funny stories from that time? I know you and your dad both enjoyed going to those games. Anything that sticks out as a memorable moment?
Oh, I'd say there's one particularly memorable moment, and it happens to involve you. But we invited you and your son to come to a game, and the star player on our team was also a family friend. And I was very excited to introduce you and your son, Alexander, to the star player. And right when the game was going to start and we walked up into the owner's suite, the general manager informed me that our star player had been traded that day and wouldn't be around. And it was a bucket of ice water on what was a pretty exciting night.
I remember it well. Yeah, the general manager was Bill Torrey, right?
That's correct. He was actually the president of the team, but Bill Torrey, the legend from the New York Islanders and a very close personal friend. And I remember when he told me, I said, no, Bill, you can't trade him. He said, Michael, he's gone.
Let's talk about your dad and the auto business and how your own car culture was built. And it goes back to Buffalo and one store and a whole bunch of scraping of funds together and borrowing and asking and begging to get that one Ford store off the ground. Tell me a little bit about that story, how your dad, Al, got his first Ford store.
Well, my dad, who is, the idol of my life, really loved the business. He was in the business working with his brother. He left, and a short time later, the local Ford district manager called him and said that there was a store available in this little town of Middleport, New York, a total of 7 employees. And my dad said, well, I'd love to buy it. And so the price was $30,000. The only problem, Jason, is that my dad didn't have $30,000.
Mm-hmm.
He was supporting 3 kids and a mortgage. He had been working at Ford in the factory. And so he went out and borrowed $5,000 from his dad. And his dad needed the money back in 30 days. He borrowed $5,000 from his sister, who got it out of her pension, and borrowed $5,000 from his father-in-law, who was a carpenter. And then the other $15,000 came from the bank. So he started on a shoestring. He worked every day and every night. And when he'd come home, my mom would literally have people sitting in the living room ready to buy cars. And it was a love story. It was a great success story. And for me, if I wanted to see my dad, the place to see him, other than on Sundays, was to go to the store with him. So I started hanging out in car dealerships when I was just a little guy.
Wow. What year was that?
Oh, gosh. He bought the store in 1955. I was born in 53. So it was just a tremendous effort on his part. He later relocated and built a beautiful store in suburban Western New York, became the #1 auto dealer in that market. And I literally grew up in that store.
but not really a car guy, but had an eye for that entrepreneurial spirit.
I think it's the love of people and the love of building teams and trying to help others be successful. And it's a kind of a reoccurring theme in both my career and my dad's career. We weren't car nuts. We're not car collectors. We certainly appreciate the product, but we really appreciate the men and women that make it work. And of course, our guests. And in our business, we don't have customers, we have guests. And the idea of trying to differentiate yourself with a better guest experience was always very appealing to me. In order to do that, you needed to attract, train, and retain talent. And we became pretty good at that.
Did your mother think he was somewhat crazy getting into the car business?
I think my mom was so in love with my dad and vice versa that she was supportive of doing what made him happy. I think what my mom used to shake her head at is as my dad became more and more successful and kept buying more and more businesses, people would say, well, how does it feel to have a wealthy husband? She'd say, I have no idea, because every time we get any money, he wants to buy something else. And we kept buying businesses and expanding. And then I follow the exact same pattern. So I guess it's a inherited character flaw.
You're shoveling snow in Buffalo. You're clearing off the lots. You're doing everything that a family member does when there's a family business that needs to run. And then you go off to college. Well, first, you were going to be a star quarterback in Buffalo. And then you go off to Colorado. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think, as a young guy, you have all these aspirations. And I was a big sports fan, and I was a decent high school quarterback and was recruited by some schools. Well, the school I chose to go to, the University of Buffalo, promptly dropped football on a state level without any warning. So as I was going to college, I went back and coached my old high school team, which was really fun. But I still had this drive to play, and I got into the University of Colorado to play football. There was only one problem, is that I wasn't talented enough to play, and I would still be sitting on the bench there if it wasn't for my switching directions into business and getting a great education and learning to snow ski along the way.
And your father calls you and says, I want you to, enough of skiing, enough of going to school. I want you to come back and run the store, right? Or help run the store.
He wanted me to come and learn the business. And I had been working there part-time since I was 13, and came back in and participated in the business for 2 years. He then bought a bankrupt Ford store in a very tough neighborhood in Miami, and announced to me that he thought it'd be great if I moved to Miami and ran the store. And that became the start of a very successful time for us in South Florida.
Yeah, you became a Floridian from that point on. But what was the state of that store when you walked into it? You said it was a tough neighborhood and it was a tough business. What did it look like?
It was literally closed. It had no employees. It was bankrupt, and we had to start from scratch and literally knew nobody in town. So, and I was sharing this with somebody yesterday. I literally worked 7 days a week for 2 straight years. And I didn't do it because I had nothing else to do. I did it because I was so afraid of losing my father's money. And so I just immersed myself in the store. And little by little, both my dad and I built a great team of people that really cared and began to define ourselves as a retailer and understand what we really believed in and how we could bring it to life. And we did that in that store, achieved a lot of success, and then bought more and more stores and tried to expand our business into other areas of automotive retail with different brands, but always by building great teams of people. We certainly didn't do it ourselves.
And was it 2 years to turn that store around? How long did it take for that?
It took about 3 years, and we had some really bumpy times. There was a race riot in Miami that was very disruptive. It's like a recurring story, but it involved a law enforcement person and a local resident, and it just escalated. And literally, the riot was at the north end of our store. So the National Guard was set up. The neighborhood was shut down. We were at home and saw in the news that our store had burned down, which didn't turn out to be accurate. But it one, it gave you a real appreciation for what people in disadvantaged neighborhoods live through and the situations they're in. But two, running a business in those kind of neighborhoods really narrowed your shopping hours. We didn't do much night business. We didn't do as much weekend business. So we had to kind of learn to do it in a totally different way. But it took a full 3 years to turn it around. And then we started looking for more opportunities to grow. And they always came in unusual kind of situations.
Such as?
Well, the second store we bought, or the biggest store we bought, was one that was terminated for warranty fraud by the OEM, and it was a General Motors store. It was the first time they'd ever terminated a store for warranty fraud. So we bought the store in a distressed situation. It was a double supermarket. It had 150 cars in the showroom, and in our first summer there, the air conditioning went out and was out for like 6 or 7 weeks, which in an indoor showroom made it like one big sauna. But over time, we grew it into be the largest store in the Southeast United States, and then relocated to what we call the Auto Plaza, which really put us on the map. We, at one time, were General Motors' largest retailer and most successful in terms of profit. And that was really because of my dad's vision and the team that we built.
And you kept the stores that were in Buffalo while you were running your Florida properties, right?
Right. There was one store, but we did keep it in. We actually kept it with us until we merged with Republic Industries, which later became AutoNation in 1997.
So let's talk about that. Most of our listeners will know AutoNation, but they might not know Republic Industries. How was that formed, and how did you get involved?
Wayne Huizenga, the legendary entrepreneur, had a history in the waste business, and he ended up acquiring this company, Republic Industries, which was kind of a shell corporation, but it had its roots in waste. And he then branched into several businesses, the rental business by buying Alamo and National Rent-A-Cars. He was establishing the AutoNation megastores at the same time. He also had a billboard business and a waste business that today is the second largest waste business in the U.S. called Republic Services. So it was this conglomeration of businesses, and I was standing on the sideline of a Monday night football game. Dan Marino was our spokesperson and a dear friend, and he invited me to go there before the game. And I got a tap on the shoulder from Steve Berard, who was Wayne's partner, and he said, "Hey, Wayne would really like to meet you." And of course, who wouldn't want to meet the owner of the Marlins, the Dolphins, the founder of Blockbuster, the founder of Waste Management, and on and on. And we met Wayne. My dad and I met with Wayne, and in a very short time, we put together a deal to merge our company with Republic Industries. And I was put in charge of the new vehicle division. I was employee number 2. And we later, over the course of 30 months, with an incredible team, went from 0 in revenue to 20 billion. We're the fastest growing company in America.
Wow.
And that was all of Republic, not just the automotive piece.
Amazing. Amazing. The vision of putting something like AutoNation together, Wayne could have only had that, right?
Yeah, and I think it's beyond vision. It was the ability to access capital. And shareholders had made a lot of money in Blockbuster, so he had a very loyal following, and he recruited raised the initial money for Republic Industries in a couple of weekends by bringing a bunch of the Wall Street guys down and the big funds that had so much success and that he had good relationships with. And we were part of that, but he raised a tremendous amount of capital and then used an appreciating stock to trade stock for other businesses. It was a great roll-up strategy. And again, only Wayne Huizenga could do it. And probably the most interesting thing about Wayne at that time was his mantra was speed is a competitive advantage. So that meant that you had to move fast, you had to think fast, you had to not be afraid of making a lot of mistakes. He encouraged you not to make the same ones over and over, but it was a tremendous chapter. We the whole team worked day and night, sometimes all night, merging with companies all over America and building an automotive network that I don't know that could be replicated today.
Wow. What was he like to work for?
He was an incredible man. He could be very tough when you were doing your annual plan and budgeting, But once that was done, you couldn't find anybody to give you greater support. And when you dealt with Wayne, you felt like you're the only person in his world. A number of times when we were between CEOs, I called him and said, Wayne, could I make an appointment to come see you about such and such an issue? And he said, no. And so I paused and he said, you don't ever need an appointment to see me. I'll be right over to your office. And he literally left his office on the other side of the river and came over to mine and just sat there and was one of the best listeners I've ever been around, and quickly grasped any complicated situation and provided invaluable advice and, more importantly, a lot of support. The second thing I learned from was how important it is to give back to the community. And he and his wife, Marty, were probably the two most generous people in the history of South Florida. I mean, there are so many organizations that benefited, but I think he also inspired another generation of leaders, myself and many others, to give back to communities. So being around him was so exciting. Certainly the sports part was, and his celebrity was, but he was just a common guy that worked harder than anybody else and had a lot of incredible traits.
Was he satisfied with what he eventually built within AutoNation along with the team members?
I think so. Everything with Wayne was for sale. So there, where I was a lifelong auto guy, he had made money in so many different businesses, and it wasn't like he was outwardly trying to sell them, but I don't think he fell in love with the business. He just loved building businesses, building shareholder value, and both himself, his team, and his shareholders all benefited from it. But I don't believe there was a deep love of any particular industry.
The philanthropic efforts you mentioned that Wayne was involved in, and the ones now that you're involved in. Tell me a little bit about that. I know that you are active in so many different entities in South Florida and nationally. Tell me about some of those.
Well, Jason, I was blessed to have great mentors, and certainly my mom and dad, who had committed to so many organizations when I was kids, literally going day to day, door to door, raising money for the American Cancer Society, doing charity golf tournaments, participating in events, writing checks, whether they would be to churches, to schools, to needy organizations. And they always felt that it was an honor and a privilege to give back, not an obligation. You then fast forward into seeing somebody like Wayne, who helped dozens and dozens of organizations and was so generous. And then today, as I look at my friends in auto retail, I see so many of them giving back. John Bergstrom up in Wisconsin, he and his family, where they take a huge part of what would be a marketing budget and use it as a community budget. And I look at three of those examples and say, that's the way business people should live their lives. So my involvement, I chaired a group called Take Stock in Children, which was helping provide scholarships to underprivileged children, where they made a commitment and we made a commitment as mentors. Morphed into Habitat for Humanity, where my wife and I have supported those. We continue to support Habitat in Colorado. But the love of our life is the Cleveland Clinic. And my mom and dad got involved very early when the Cleveland Clinic came to South Florida. And my dad later asked me to co-chair a leadership council with them. And it created this love affair that's really based on what we felt as South Florida didn't have the incredible healthcare that some other major metros had. And certainly there's great institutions in South Florida, but we felt that the number of people leaving South Florida to get world-class care created a big opportunity. So we led a capital campaign, contributed significant of our family dollars, built the Maroone Cancer Center at the Cleveland Clinic, but helped build a number of other things. And then I was later invited to join their board of trustees, and then their what I call the global board, which is their enterprise board. And today I also chair Cleveland Clinic Florida. So that it's not about me, it's really about them. The people in this organization are amazing. There's over 80,000 caregivers. They're growing and growing and growing in a very tough industry, but they're providing this healthcare to people from all walks of life and saving lives every single day. And it is such an honor and a privilege to be to get to know those caregivers and get to support those caregivers and to play the role that we're able to play.
And what have you learned about the hospital business? You just mentioned that it's a tough industry.
It's a brutal industry, and we just went through, as the rest of civilization did, the global pandemic, and it put those caregivers in a certain light. When other businesses were shut down, they were open. When people were dying, they were there caring for them. The pressures they had, the commitment, the hearts they have that went with those efforts were amazing. And today you've got inflation being a huge factor in healthcare, and the reimbursement rates not anywhere near that. So you see so many hospitals operating at a loss or operating at a break even. And so the business acumen has got to go with this incredible commitment to teaching, to caring, to researching in healthcare. So it's a very challenging chapter, and it's one that I'm really enjoying, again, because I'm blessed to work with wonderful people.
What's the next stage as it relates to healthcare and one subject that comes up on this program a lot, which is artificial intelligence?
Well, I think the next stage is really getting more access to more people. You can't treat healthcare as an elitist business, and you have to take on all that really need you. So, and that's where the financial pressure comes from. The reimbursement rates don't match, but you can't say no to people that are fighting for their lives. And I think I'm so proud of what the Cleveland Clinic does and how many people they serve. They also have great technology. They do partnerships with Microsoft, with IBM. They've got, I think, the second quantum computer that IBM's ever built. And now there's big time work being done with Google, Microsoft, IBM, and others in AI. And, one of the challenges in healthcare is the amount of documentation the doctors have to do, and using AI to populate a lot of that documentation and allow the physicians to spend quality time with their patients, not 3 or 4 hours a day, making sure that they get reimbursed at the right rate. So I think that billing and admin is one, but the other is got to be in the research part of it and finding new ways to solve very complex problems. So I'm very excited about this chapter, very proud that the Cleveland Clinic and Dr. Mihaljevic, the CEO, is so intertwined in the tech community and has brought in some outside folks that are non-medical people to make sure that we're optimizing the patient experience, optimizing the medical research, finding new ways to help people. It's very exciting to me, and someplace I'm very proud to serve.
Get back to cars for a minute. You've had an experience over the last number of years with Carvana, and Ernie Garcia Jr. has been on this program. He was on a couple of years ago, and the ups and downs of Carvana are well documented, but the one thing that is consistent is the transformative, disruptive nature of Carvana on the rest of the industry. Tell me about your experience with Carvana.
Well, I guess it must be a problem I have looking for disruption in life. Certainly AutoNation in the early days with our rapid acquisition. I can remember being on the cover of an industry magazine with a big X through my face. And it's kind of like, Mike, what have you done? I like change, and I don't want to be on the trailing end of change. I'd like to be on the leading end of change. So I was invited by a mutual friend of ours, Sandy Schwartz from Cox, to go out and meet the Garcia family, which I did reluctantly because I was not looking for a board role. But once I went out there and heard about their vision for the guest, I was intrigued. And it was very similar to my first conversation with Wayne Huizenga, when it was all talking again about the guest. And so I joined right after the IPO in May of 2017. What's interesting is the board of directors, with one exception, and the executive team are all the same people. And we've all been through this huge roller coaster and this big learning curve. The first thing is to prove that you could sell used cars sight unseen to people. And Carvana built this tremendous trust with customers or guests, and with money back guarantees. And if you're unhappy for any reason, we'll pick up the car and take it back, and built this great engine and grew 7 years in a row at 100% top line growth. I don't think they were the fifth fastest growing company in U.S. history. And then after the pandemic gave the business a big shot, they were investing very aggressively in growth, and the market twisted, and affordability became the issue, and car prices went up, and Carvana went from great top line growth to huge operating losses. And to the credit of the management team, they pivoted like no business I've ever seen, and have now driven the company into a very profitable situation. So the stock was very, very high. I think at one time the stock was worth more than Ford Motor Company and almost as much as GM. It was $360 a share, dropped down into $3 a share when they had operating losses with lots of rumors about bankruptcy, which was never going to happen in my view. But it was a very challenging time. And I think you learn in those challenging times what people are really made of. And Ernie Garcia, both father and son, and the management team at Carvana have done an incredible job. They're literally the smartest and scrappiest team that I've ever been around. And it's been a wonderful experience for me. And hopefully I've contributed a little bit along the way, but I've learned a ton about what guests want and how to deliver things on using scale.
And how have they disrupted the market, maybe perhaps permanently?
I think it's in the early stages. Carvana is 1% of the used car business. So I think it speaks to the opportunity. All of their online competitors, all two or three of them, are now exited the business.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's really franchise dealers, CarMax, and there's other players out there. But I think it's still very early stage. Carvana's built a logistics platform and a series of locations where they now serve 85% of the U.S. and have figured out how to do it profitably and sell cars at less than market prices along the way. So it's a very difficult feat, and I think they've done a great job.
The industry in general, we talk a lot on this program about EVs. Now there's a pendulum shift to hybrids, and the changing consumer, which is related to Carvana. Where are we on EVs and hybrids and internal combustion engine vehicles? And you sell them on a daily basis, all of them. How do you feel as a dealership owner, a business owner, and a dealer?
I feel like we're at an in-between stage, Jason. The last couple of years have been incredible hype about the future of EVs, with it being top-down, government-driven, with mandates and EPA mandates talking about, the level of pollution from internal combustion engines and what the solutions are. And it puts some very high standards in a capital-intense industry, along with federal incentives that are as high as $7,500, state incentives as high as $5,000. So they're pushing it. And all of a sudden, the consumer kind of woke up and said, we don't really have the infrastructure yet. We think that the range is limiting, especially when you're dealing in inclement weather or high altitude or unusual terrain. And we're not sure that's the direction we want to go. At the same time that government, both in the U.S. and around the world, are pushing it very, very, very hard. So the industry's pivoted again and is developed or is renewed an old strategy of the hybrid strategy that was first popularized by Toyota. And right now, hybrids seem to be at the center. I think the open question is, as batteries develop, as the charging system expands, will we ultimately be at all EV or the majority at EV? The one thing that we know is that we want to leave the planet in a better place. We want clean air for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. And when I say we, I'm not about people inside and outside the industry. Nobody wants pollution. So it's a matter of how you get there. And right now, the uncertainty is hybrid going to be the bridge, or is hybrid going to be the solution? If I was a betting man, I would say it's a bridge, but it's a very good bridge, and it's one that people are migrating to. In the meantime, there have been tens of billions of dollars spent by individual manufacturers in EV development with no return. So the OEMs are losing a lot of money selling what EVs are selling. And by the way, so are dealers. People don't understand these vehicles are being sold at a loss, and it's going to take time to get to scale and to get the infrastructure ready for EVs.
Yeah, you've got customers in Colorado and Florida where you own and operate stores now. What's their appetite toward EVs?
Appetite has diminished a great deal.
Yeah.
And it's been relatively quick. It's been in the last 4, 5, 6 months. But I don't think people are giving up. There's a price issue. Some of the EVs out in the marketplace are quite expensive. And then there's the uncertainties. So I think EVs are a no-brainer if you've got 2 and 3 cars in the garage. If it's your sole form of transportation, or if you're living, whether it's an apartment building or someplace that doesn't have overnight charging capability, you've got different challenges. And again, all these challenges will be solved at some point in time, but it is an uncertain time. And there's been a lot of capital spent that's not going to get a return in the short term, both by dealers and by manufacturers.
It's funny when you think about the last few years, even pre-COVID, a lot of talk of the subscription model, a lot of talk of Uber, the Uberization of the industry, and the fact that, folks wouldn't, consumers wouldn't be buying cars and they would just be taking Uber everywhere. That was a disruptor, obviously, probably more so to the taxi industry than anything else. And a lot of talk of autonomous vehicles. And now all three issues have sort of drifted away to some extent, haven't they, Mike?
Yeah, I think they have. And if I go back to my time in the business, which is 50 years now, sounds crazy, there has been threats every year of different threats. One of the big threats was the Japanese manufacturers coming to America. It was the Koreans coming to America. It was the gas guzzlers. There's always been something. And lately there's been a lot. And at the same time, the business has never been stronger. We think that the dealers add tremendous value, that the service network and the sales network and the physical infrastructure really matter to guests. And we seem to survive. It's a very resilient industry, and one that I still have tremendous optimism about. I don't believe the American auto dealer is going to be disrupted. I believe they are going to be challenged. I believe there'll be new entrants, and I believe we're going to have to get much better and continue to invest in our product and invest in our experience in order to make it work.
But buying cars has become a extremely expensive endeavor of late. And you've had a good phrase for this. You've which I've used before, which is it's a case of boxing out the middle class. And I know you see that in some of your communities where you have stores that you own and operate. Affordability as a crisis, right, Mike?
It is, and it's an ongoing crisis, Jason. And by the way, it's a crisis in service and parts, not just in sales. The cost of servicing vehicles has gone way up. There's an intense competition for talent and technicians and service advisors. There's the tool requirements, the different technologies. It's really, really tough. And it's, I think, going to continue to get tougher. And you've just got to be flexible and you've got to be resilient. And again, you've got to keep investing in the business and investing in technology and investing in people in order to compete.
You operate right now the same number of stores that you did when you sold to AutoNation, correct?
That's correct.
What's next for Mike Maroone? Is there another merger in the works with some big entity, or would you like to own more stores?
I think I've been cured from merging with big entities. The AutoNation experience was an incredible experience for me. What's different this time is I have another generation of the family involved in the business, and I have operating partners with equity. So I think, nothing lasts forever. But for now, we're acquiring stores. We're trying to perfect our model. We're trying to develop more people. We're always investing back in people. We don't take a lot of capital out of our stores. So I think it's intelligent expansion and looking at ancillary businesses that help support it. Businesses like AI, businesses like insurance. There's lots of businesses around auto retail that I think we can develop as future profit centers and continue our guest-centric focus.
And speaking of AI, you're also heavily involved in a company called Stella. Tell me about that.
I am, and I have not historically been a venture capital investor, but I was intrigued by the opportunities coming into our industry, and AI probably being the most intriguing. And our focus, Jason, is always to help our people be more successful, improve the guest experience, but help them enjoy more success. And part of it is finding technologies that allow them to be more productive without working harder. So, and in this case, AI, the two early use cases are one with service appointments that reduce the number of calls coming in a store, but get every call handled on the first ring, get people the information they need to know to create that good service experience. And we also have just launched a reception product that helps people navigate a store. I think they're very early use cases. I can see a ton of uses for AI in auto retail, but all of it will be to enhance the guest experience and to help our associates do more and be even more successful. So I think there's a great fit there. And I think Stella is an amazing company. It's got great leadership. The CEO is Rich Sands, who's got a deep auto background. I think he's done a very good job, and it's a very rapid growth story. But like all new startups, there's some bumpy days, but we think it'll have a very happy ending and a great run.
You're also just a final few things here, Mike. You're also involved in a number of other industries, some of which we haven't really talked about yet. What do you borrow from those industries that you apply to the auto industry?
I think that every business starts with, what does the guest really want? And how can I get that guest what they want in the most efficient way, with transparency, with speed, with convenience, with accuracy? And I think it's similar in healthcare. It's similar in every business I've been involved in, is getting people the products that they need and allow them to make an intelligent experience for themselves and their family. And every business that I'm involved in seems to have that same theme: is what does the guest really want, and how can we do this even better?
Yeah. What's next for you generally? Are you interested in other fields that you're not in currently?
I think I'm still focused primarily in automotive, in healthcare, and I think those are probably, I don't want to say it's it, because I do invest in. I've been investing in some carbon capture business that I'm very intrigued with as well, and a lot of real estate. But those don't take my time, and I'm not sure I add a lot of value in those conversations. I add capital and investment, but I think the value I add is more in a retail experience and how to build teams, and that can be transformed outside of auto retail into other businesses. So I think my chapter is keep going, stay healthy. I'm working with some very bright family members, at both a CFO with John Hochter and a COO with William Knowles, Alex DeMorgan being an operating partner. All of my stores have operating partners. So my job is how can I best support them? And it's a job I really enjoy.
When you reflect back, and when your father said to you, "I'm sending you to the worst part of Miami to go run a store that's closed," and you think about where you sit today, that's got to be an incredible 50-year journey.
It's been great. And I would tell you, I'm grateful for every single day of it. And I'm grateful for the men and women that helped us get there. It's so easy in business to say, well, I did this and I did that. And, my dad and I built this. The reality of it is there was thousands and thousands of people that dedicated countless hours and a lot of sweat and some tears to helping us build these businesses. And today, I try and stay in touch with as many of them as I can and keep letting them know how grateful I am for their help in us building a great business. And hopefully we help their families economically and providing challenges and opportunities for them. So as I look back on my career, it's always been about the people that helped us grow these businesses, and knowing that this is the ultimate team sport.
And I know that team thanked you. And when you left AutoNation, and I was in a former role at Automotive News and wrote a column about your departure, and one of the things you shared with me were the and this was not meant to on your side to be anything other than a show of support, but the hundreds of individuals who wrote you personal handwritten letters thanking you, your team members, and for the opportunities that you gave them was momentous. And I know that they're all very appreciative today, Mike.
Well, thanks for reminding me of that. It's I spent 18 years doing that and met so many people that meant so much. And to get personal notes, and there's literally hundreds of them. I still have them in a big box in my office. And from time to time, just pick up a few and read them. And it just reminds me of the journey and how important people are in business. It's not about money. It's about growth and helping others and serving guests better than anybody ever has. And that's always our goal.
Wonderful. Mike Maroone, entrepreneur, business legend, automotive guy. Thank you for being on the program.
Jason, it's a great honor. Thanks for having me.
The honor is all mine. Thank you.